So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the second seminar in the Research Unlocked online seminar series here at the University of Suffolk. My name is Dr. Linda Cooper. I'm a Associate Professor and Deputy Director in the Institute of Social Justice and Crime, here to share the work that we've been doing with Iceni. And I'd like to introduce my colleague who's been working on the project with me.
Hello, my name is Paige Marrett. I'm a Master's in Applications of Psychology student at the University of Suffolk, but I'm also the Research Associate on this project that we've been doing with Iceni and the collaboration there.
Thanks, Paige. So we're going to be telling you a little bit about the project as we go through. I firstly need to just acknowledge that the project we're going to be speaking about was funded by UKRI Innovate UK, and we've been supported by our excellent colleague Jenny Carberry in our Research and Knowledge Exchange team. I'm now going to hand it over to our colleagues at Iceni, who are going to introduce themselves and start the presentation.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining. My name is Ali Oxborough, and I'm Community Liaison and Fundraising Lead. With me this afternoon is my colleague, Nicole Sadler, our Operations Manager, and also our Chief Executive, Brian Tobin, MBE, is joining us as well. And before really we get into the nuts and bolts of EmpowerHER and the rationale behind that, I'm going to hand over to Brian, and he's basically going to give a little bit of background with some stats just to set the scene. Brian.
Thank you, Ali. Good afternoon. Iceni's been delivering a service in Suffolk for 25 years with substance misuse, and we've been aware that women have been underrepresented in mainstream services, not just here in Suffolk, but across the UK. And when we look at estimating the number of women it's difficult to quantify the number of women that struggle with dependencies and drug and alcohol. But the Institute of Alcohol Studies suggests that 1 in 7 women drink problematically, and then they go on to suggest that there's around 200,000 women across the UK that aren't in some sort of treatment where they probably need to be. Last year in the UK, there was around 330,000 adults in the substance misuse treatment field. About 30% of those were women. So we can say they're underrepresented. And why we were interested in this particular issue was emanated from the Dame Carol Black report in 2021, where she suggested that women-only spaces, lack of women-only spaces or tailored services for women are desperately needed. She's pointed out the drug systems are often not gender sensitive and are typically designed around men. So she calls for more tailored, gender-sensitive, safe places for women. And that's what this pilot project started to look at, could we have a safe space for women only, where we could increase engagement with women and indeed try and support them with their substance misuse. So that was the background.
Thank you, Brian. So really, bottom line for us is, as Brian said, why EmpowerHER? Why did we want to think about the barriers that women had in accessing mainstream services? And as he's mentioned, undoubtedly, it is the Black report. So if we go to slide 1, please. So that was published in 2021, and she did conclude that mixed gender models, i.e. model a service where both men and women are accessing support, just doesn't work for women. And did lead to an underrepresentation. We also wanted to get behind some of the challenges, and we're going to talk about those a little bit later on in this discussion. We thought we knew, but we wanted a mechanism that was really going to cement our thinking. But bottom line, our aim was to understand whether a women-only environment would be conducive to create conditions for women to begin to understand their addiction and to find ways to address and reduce their substance misuse. That's really where we were going with this. So if we could go to the next slide, please. And we know at Iceni, 75% of our caseload is in fact women. And we know that behaviour for women in engaging in substance misuse is markedly different to men. And as Brian said, that does align to the difference in numbers. Government figures April 23 to March 25 would say that there are about 311,000 people to access or meant to access opiate support, so that's heroin, 72%, but for women only 27%. Non-opiate support for men, about 68%, women 31%. So we know that there's a lot of women out there that probably need some support and they're just not getting it for whatever reason, really. So that's just really to set the scene. But in terms of I guess how they become involved, if we were looking at gender, as we've said here, shapes initiation, consumption, dependency and related behaviours. Again, very different. Very often men will be introduced to substance misuse through social situations, parties. For women, it's very different. Very often they will come across and be introduced to it through intimate relationships, self-medication. A family member may introduce them to sort of drugs and alcohol. And in terms of intimate partner influence, we know that women are far more likely to be introduced to a sexual partner. They sometimes feel they have to use through pressure, either to remain in the relationship or really as a joint activity. Self-medication as well. They will often use substances as a coping mechanism for trauma, especially if they're wanting to manage anxiety or depression. It can be used for alleviating pain as well. And prescription drugs obviously can also play a huge part in that. And in terms of consumption for women, although men consume more drugs and alcohol than women, the gap is closing, and partly due to something called telescoping. And that's often about the fact that they will often progress faster from first use through to addiction. Dependency as well. Sometimes for women with their higher body fat percentage as well, that can cause sometimes higher substance concentration. And if they've experienced motivation or say trauma in their life, they're more likely to turn to drugs and alcohol really to actually manage that emotional pain and relationship issues that they've had in their lives as well. Social stigma is a great one as well. Women can often feel very judged by society, and therefore it will take them longer to gain any form of support to access any help. So therefore they remain dependent longer. Risk-related behaviours, that's a big one. We often know that women with substance misuse are more likely to engage in high-risk sexual behaviours, which obviously then opens up a propensity, higher risk of contracting HIV, Hep C, and sometimes mental health will go hand in hand as well. And they will use that. They will have eating disorders, and that can worsen addiction as well. If we go on to slide 3, the next slide, thank you. So we thought that we knew what some of the problems for women were in accessing mainstream services. And some of them are up there now. As I've said, the social stigma. Women will obviously experience greater societal shame, really, being judged by society, often thought of as unfit mothers, really, especially if they have children. One of the biggest reasons that we often see as well is people are afraid of their children being removed. So therefore, they remain under the radar because they don't want to bring attention to themselves with the risk of losing their children as well. Also, sometimes triggers for relapse. Women are more likely to engage, or more likely to relapse, I should say, due to the negativity and the emotions that they're feeling and the stress that they're having. I think Linda and Paige will talk later on in the study, but often financial challenges are a problem. Just women having the money to be able to travel to get support is a real problem for them. And a real big one here as well, experiencing childhood trauma. Very often women going into male-orientated spaces to seek support for their substance misuse, they're very afraid to do so. They'll feel vulnerable, especially if they have been victims, as I said previously, perhaps of sexual assault, domestic abuse, earlier on in their lives. So that's some of the problems why they don't actually access. Next slide, please. So when we were thinking about the kind of EmpowerHER pilot, what did we want to do? Iceni, we are driven a lot by lived experience. That forms a lot the policy and the practice. And I'm just going to hand over to Nicole. She's going to share with us the role that the focus groups have played in putting EmpowerHER together.
So we felt it was imperative to consult with our lived experience group of females to give feedback on their own experience of our service, if they felt anything was missing, what we could have added to their support, and what barriers they faced, and also looking at what they thought would be helpful for other women coming through. Throughout the design of the project, we went back and forth consulting with them with our ideas, and they also played an active role in welcoming participants at the beginning of the project.
So that's really the role that the lived experience played, a really important role, we feel, in fact, a vital role in bringing this pilot to life, because we wanted to really be spot on in terms of what we offered our women, what that was going to look like, the type of support that we were going to give in terms of a non-sort of clinical, a warm and welcoming environment, and the interventions that we wanted to provide in terms of holistic offerings as well. So next slide, please, if we could. So what do we do? How do we do it? What you can see on this slide, we do anyway at Iceni, but we wanted to make sure that really what we included, how we work with our people, we wanted to make sure that this followed through into this pilot. So we always adopt a strength-based approach to treatment. We focus on the women's resilience. We wanted to acknowledge the role that trauma's played in their lives. But as I said, it was really important for us that when we brought this pilot to life, the conditions had to be right. It had to be a non-clinical, safe space where trust was really paramount for these women. Teamwork, that we all worked together, and the interventions that we used were very much along the lines of CBT and that motivational interviewing, because we knew that we needed to make sure the environment was really as positive and as welcoming a space as it could be to enable these women to start to disclose and think about working towards a better, more positive way of life. Next slide, please. Now, again, the creation for EmpowerHER, a lot of what you see here, we've said, you know, we knew a women's only space was the way to go. We knew the barriers that these women were facing. It was backed up by you know, Dame Carol Black. And so when we put this together, we wanted to undertake our work, as we always do, but it was especially important with a stance of integrity, non-judgmental, and just being open-minded to both us and the women to change, and to make sure that this service was going to be really accessible to the more marginalised kind of communities, if you like, of which we've identified women are very much one of them. So really, in a way, once we'd put all of that in place, EmpowerHER as a pilot was born. So although I've given you a little bit of the background, the rationale, you know, Brian set the scene and we've given you some sort of statistics, Nicole is now going to share with us practically what EmpowerHER looked like when it was brought to life. Next slide, please.
So the EmpowerHER programme ran every Friday for 12 weeks, and that started with a therapeutic programme called Sununa, and this was split into 3 blocks, which focused on building emotional awareness, helping women recognise, understand and respond to their feelings with compassion and confidence. The second block was about recognising self-worth and gaining understanding about the premise of self-preservation. And we rounded up with understanding human needs and exploring personal power. And the programme followed on by group acupuncture and guided meditation, which we always offer at Iceni, and we found to be helpful, offering that space for reflection, relaxation, as well as treating physical, mental and emotional needs. And this was followed up each week by a Be Good to Yourself session. We wanted to introduce activities that women may not have had the opportunity to try before, whilst also supporting their well-being. And this included activities such as embodiment yoga, sound baths, stretch and meditate, bath salt making, as well as looking at practical needs such as sexual health and a financial support workshop. So
I think also we just want to mention as well, we found the timings worked particularly well, didn't they, for us, because 10 till 2 very often our women are mothers as well, and so this was going to enable them to drop off and collect, and so we really were trying to think about the whole process from when the women arrive to when the women go home. I mean, this is a study that we've been particularly proud of, and we are proud of, and we're really, really, really thankful to Paige and to Linda for bringing this to life, because they've walked with us through this pilot. And so hopefully we're going to hand over to you, and you're going to share some of the findings around what went on throughout that study as you were speaking and observing.
Lovely. Thank you, Ali, Nicole and Brian. And just to give you a bit of background, we actually came together with Iceni at an event here at the University of Suffolk. We held an Unlocked event, and Ali and I were brought together by a colleague from Innovate UK who said, we've got a call coming up looking for funding around addictions, and we think you might work really well together. And wonderfully, Ali said yes, and we got in a room, and here we are. So we went ahead with Innovate, we won this funding, and we were brought in to come and observe the programme that Nicole just went through with you, and to give you our independent feedback in terms of what we found. I think the real original sort of core of the work was really driven by Iceni's ethos, which is around this idea of a holistic approach, of a humanist approach, of creating conditions to enable people to help themselves. And this quote with one of our practitioners, one of Iceni's practitioners rather, is around the idea of creating those conditions, giving people the space to explore and find out what underpins their needs. And then this beautiful line around an openness, a warmth and embrace, and, you know, to create this space where people really want to come in and feel that they can come in and be supported. So it was really important that we started from that point of understanding how Iceni like to provide their support to the people who they help. So what did we do? So Nicole ran through what the sessions were. So it was a 12-week project. It was a very small pilot. Paige and I went in, we are the research team. We went in to each of the Sununa group workshops for the first 6. We observed those workshops. We had the women who were undertaking the workshops gave their consent for us to be there, and all consent went through university ethics here at Suffolk. Average of about 8 women in each group, sometimes a couple less, sometimes a couple more. That was great. So we sat in on those observations. We undertook 3 interviews with practitioners who offer support and guidance at Iceni to the women. We also spoke with members of their lived experience group, and Ali has outlined the importance of the voice of their lived experience at Iceni. We also undertook a survey. Again, all women who received support from Iceni were offered the opportunity to take part. We had 13 responses to that. And based on that data, which we're going to share with you, we've come up with some recommendations and some conclusions to take forward. And just to say that the workshop themselves were group workshops for the women to come together and to talk about through a self-awareness and a self-confidence way to talk about the experiences that they're going through. And as Nicole also outlined, that was supported by their complementary therapy programme. I'm now going to hand over to Paige, who's going to talk you through the fieldwork that we did.
Excellent. Thank you, Linda. I just firstly wanted to say a big thank you to everyone at Iceni, all your staff and practitioners, all the women that are involved in the Sununa sessions who so generously have given us your time and been so open-handed and generous with the time that you've shared with us. So thank you. So in terms of our observations of some of those Sununa workshops, Linda and I really looked at those as a whole, those 6 sessions, and we came up with some themes out of those. So firstly, there was a real sense of the loss of the self from some of those women, and a loss of confidence and hope in their experiences so far with substance misuse. One of the women said, I used drugs to self-destruct. They replaced my inspiration and they took my younger years away. They took my hopes for a job or a career away. I think one of them women had A-levels in sciences and was working towards a nursing career, and there was a real sense of the loss of confidence through their experiences. And then another was really navigating emotions around family and relationships. There was a real sense of peer pressure. I mean, we were coming up to Christmas at this point, and one of the women was talking about the real challenge of going to Christmas work parties and kind of the impact on on her for that. But really, some of the women were talking about the boundaries and the routines that they were learning from Iceni, and how beneficial that was for them and their children, and the impact on the wider family. And then navigating relationships with children's parents and friends and family. There was a real sense of a difficulty in navigating those emotions, but our observation was that the practitioners did a great job in allowing a safe space for those women to explore those emotions and understand that for themselves. We also saw coming out of that, kind of coming up to the end of the 6 sessions, there was a real emergence of hope and a gaining of that confidence, which I'm also going to talk through in terms of the survey as well. In terms of the interviews that we did with some of the practitioners, really highlighting Iceni's ethos in terms of creating that space where people can change the dynamic of their life for themselves, a real empowering and putting in those boundaries and creating the conditions for sobriety for people, for themselves. And the hope for their practitioners was to give hope to change, to take away things that the women can implement to feel better about themselves, and to have tried things that they maybe wouldn't have accessed before. And to see the women really enjoying acupuncture and some of the yoga, embodiment yoga, that was just so wonderful to see them learning about themselves, and then coming back each week saying, oh, I've put this into practice and that was really great, or I wasn't sure about that. Was just really wonderful to see that was really at the core of everything for those. And then the survey, it's important to note that we had 13 responses. It's not a huge number of responses, but there was so much rich data that came through here, and some really wonderful comments. So we had 13 responses. Over 50% of those were in the 41 to 50 age category, but Iceni is supporting women from ages 18 plus. And over 70% of those women were not in education, employment or training. Is higher than that if you include the full-time caring responsibilities, and a small portion of them, 15%, were in part-time employment. One of our most salient findings, I think, Linda, that really spoke to us was the reach that Iceni have across the area, Suffolk and even South Norfolk. There's women travelling over 30 miles to reach Iceni for the support that they are giving. And one of the respondents highlighted that they walk 2 miles to reach Iceni if they don't have the funds for the bus. As Ali was talking about earlier, that can be a real challenge for women. So that really speaks to us about the impact that Iceni are having, and how much they are drawing women to their services, that they're non-clinical, they're non-judgmental, their safe space approach is really drawing women who need that support, as Brian and Ali have so wonderfully highlighted. And then some of our other survey findings, some of our qualitative work, one of the main themes that came from that was that there was a reduced self-supported substance misuse. So 7 out of the 13 respondents voluntarily highlighted that they have reduced their substance misuse intake. So that could be cocaine, weed, or prescribed medication. And we didn't ask that as a question. So that was really interesting finding. And then I spoke earlier about the sense of loss of confidence, but in the survey, it really came through that Iceni is creating the conditions for people to increase their confidence and their self-efficacy in their everyday life. One woman said, this Iceni has given me enormous amounts of confidence to stay sober, to change my outlook on life. Another said, I'm more confident, I've got my smile, my laugh back. And then one of the main themes that came through the survey in the qualitative was a feeling of empowerment. I have more control of my life now. Another said, I'm more confident and I've been able to apply for volunteer opportunities after not having worked for many years. Iceni, you're doing a fantastic job of creating the conditions for people to really push themselves forward in terms of a career. And lastly, Iceni are providing life-saving support. One of the respondents wrote anonymously, Without Iceni, I could have easily taken my own life this year. And then lastly, from me, this quote: before I came to Iceni, I had a problem with drugs and alcohol. My ex had strangled me, the police arrested me, and social removed my kids from me for 6 months. Iceni saved me. I can honestly say they built me up. And so it's been an absolute pleasure to work with Iceni and to see the impact that they're having, and the work that the women are doing with themselves, for themselves, has just been absolutely inspiring. So I'm going to hand over to Linda, who's going to talk through some of our conclusions.
Thanks, Paige. So hopefully that really highlights some of the real powerful stories we were getting, the importance of this work, and to really try to understand the situation of the importance of a women-only group. And, it has been put to us, why a women-only group? I think it's really important, and one of our conclusions were that actually it was really important to provide an emotionally safe space, particularly for women who had experienced domestic violence or negative male relationships generally. We did ask one of the questions in the survey about whether sort of partnership working would be a way forward. The survey did suggest that male partners were unlikely to engage with Iceni. Apologies, there's a typo there. There should be a bracket closed. And so we're going to have conversations there about what's going to work going forward. In terms of external factors, we really highlighted the issues around relationships and the difficulties that individuals have if they are being coerced or invited to engage in alcohol or substance misuse, either by a personal through a personal relationship or in work-related situations. As I say, because we were in Iceni just running up to Christmas, we were really conscious of the pressures of the Christmas parties on people that were trying to abstain, and that really came through as quite a strong theme. I think it really hit both of us, this sense of the loss of self. It was absolutely written through all of the observations, the hopes of futures and motivations, had waned, and we saw even in the very short time that we were overviewing the observations of actually this sense of return of hope and motivation. And there were women in that room with extremely important jobs, had extremely important jobs, had important careers that had either lost or had been waned. And we started to see a movement back towards perhaps we can get back to where we were. The non-clinical approach, I think, has been a really important hook, particularly for this call, in terms of understanding addictions. I have to say, when we went in at the beginning, sort of talking about a self-empowerment, self-awareness course, how was that going to support women who had some substance and alcohol misuse? But actually, it really, in the moment worked, and it enabled women to open up and to speak and have the confidence to talk about moving towards sobriety. And we also underestimated the power of the peer support of the women in the group for other women, and that came through very strongly. Paige has talked about the large distances people are travelling to get this support. Probably should also caveat that Iceni do also offer funding for support for women that need that as well. So there are women that are moving a long way and coming around school hours, around other commitments, to ensure they get the help they need to try and move their lives forward. And this programme really is promoting self-confidence and this idea of the conditions to enable women to better support themselves to tackle the issues that they have. And just before I go on to the summary, I think Ali is going to share your plans for the next stage for this programme.
Thanks, Linda. As I said before, obviously we handed over to Linda. We are extremely proud at Iceni of all the work that has gone into this and how successful this pilot has been. So much so, Nicole, I think you're in the middle now of actually putting the next one in place. We're actually planning to start our next one in May. And already, I mean, this is fluid in as much as we've taken on board comments from the women. We are now researching and have on board some new interventions. Actual people have come forward and have heard about this pilot and said, I'd really like to be involved. For example, reflexology, which we think will be especially popular with our women. So we want to think about adding to that repertoire of interventions. Obviously, we feel what we've done has worked. We're going to keep continuing to do what we're doing. As we've said, that holistic, non-clinical approach definitely works for women. It gives them the best opportunity to be able to step back, take a breath, think about what's gone on for them, and start to work towards a more positive future. Self-esteem, I think we've realised as well, we need to integrate into all stages of this, the work, into all stages of the pilot. So that's something that we'll continue to review. Outreach, yeah, the 30 miles was just phenomenal. When I think Brian, Nicole, when we saw that, we just couldn't believe, if women want to change, the motivation is there, to walk the 2 miles, that's phenomenal. We would like to see this going out into, into Suffolk, maybe into the future. Brian, I don't know if there's anything you want to share at all.
It was a pilot, and we're going to get 2 or 3 more programs under our belt. Obviously, that's going to help for future funding for the organisation. But it would be lovely to see if we could replicate this in other areas, or it be replicated in other areas by others. Yeah,
this is definitely informing our policy and practice. And I guess really what we'd like to see is this going further afield. I know, I've already been approached by somebody on LinkedIn who saw what we were doing, and we've had a meeting, haven't we, Linda, earlier on in the week, because they are thinking similarly, a different area out of county. So it was great to get to know them as well and have a chat. So that's where we're at the moment.
Lovely, thank you, Ali. And just before we wrap up on this slide, just to say the project was set up as an action research project, which is a plan, do, review approach. So we planned the project, Iceni planned what they wanted to do, they undertook the project, and then they've reviewed it. And in that review, it's allowed them to think what worked and what they might want to change for the next round. And that this programme is really actually a pure example of action research in progress. So just to conclude, so I thought we had a recommendation slide. Just to conclude, we've made some recommendations to Iceni. Obviously, the recommendations that actually they do continue with this project, because because of the small numbers, because I would reiterate, it is a pilot and therefore the numbers are small and it was time limited, we have actually recommended that the programme continues to run. We've also recommended that they look at other programmes that they also deliver and how they can take the learning from that into their own programme. A big part of why we're involved, obviously, is the research elements of the work. And we would very much like to continue to work with Iceni to ensure that they can secure future funding so they can continue to offer the programme that they do offer and the support that they do offer. So there's a huge amount going on there. I think there's much more to capture. We are keen to remain involved. The University of Suffolk does have a civic engagement strategy, and we are very much keen to work with local charities and local organisations. And I think this has been a really, really good and powerful example of how research and practice can work really well together. I'm going to just stop there. I think that's all of our slides, and I would be very happy to invite any questions you may have into the chat. Okay, we're just going to wait a little while and see if anyone has any questions or any thoughts. In the interim, anybody in the team want to add anything else, or is everybody happy they've shared everything about the project?
No, I think that's probably all from us, Linda. I think that's where we're at.
Yeah, perfect. Oh yeah, as I say, I would reiterate that this project is very much looking at distance travelled in terms of the distance that the women on the programme have come. So it's been a really powerful project, and we're super keen to keep working on this programme and others at Iceni to show the power of research into practice and practice into research. Right. So we're just going to hold on a little while longer, just see if there's anyone who's shy who wants to come up with any questions. Okay. If you do have any further questions about the project, obviously I can be contacted. There's my email address. Brian and Ali, there's the website for Iceni. Please take a look. There's fantastic stuff going on beyond this project. It's been a delight sharing our work with you and sharing the stage with Ali, Nicole, Brian from Paige and I. Thank you for joining us. Please do get in touch, and thank you for listening. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.